Hi, how's everyone out there doing today? This is Amy Hamilton. I am author of The Project Manager Life is a Project and The Consummate Communicator Character Traits of True Professionals. And I am doing my marathon session, 24 authors, 12 hours. It is January 20th, Inauguration Day in the United States. And I am here with Richard Maurer. Richard wrote a very intriguing book. And what I will say is, for those of you who followed the show in the past, I don't normally do politics. I don't normally do anything sexual. And I don't normally do religion. And you know what? This show, I'm doing it all. That's right. I'm breaking all the rules. But part of it is I think it's important that we have civility. And civility is a concept that I talk about quite a bit in my second book. And the thing about civility is you don't have to always agree about something, but you have to be willing to just listen and to learn. And this is part of why Richard's on the show. And so Richard wrote How We Got Here, Leadership, the Coronavirus, and Donald Trump, a Codependence Story. So Richard, can you share with our audience what inspired you to write this book?
Well, it was really pretty simple. Back in January, in my day job, I'm a pilot for a commercial airline. And we started seeing right away what was going on in China, and it concerned us because we have pilots and flight attendants who fly over there. And so I started watching it from an early point, and I saw where it was going. I've kind of got a unique background. I have spent a lot of time involved with work that touches biology and medicine. And I also have an aerospace engineering degree from MIT. Now, where that becomes relevant is that this
It just means you're
disease,
really, really smart.
well, there's plenty of people with that degree that don't necessarily meet that definition, and I might be one of them. I'm not sure. But what I do know is I know how air molecules travel through the air, and I know how things like viruses that hitch rides on things like water particles travel. And so I understood a lot of the fundamental science involved, and I realized that number one, we didn't seem to be doing the things that needed to be getting done, and number two, the right information was not getting out. So, I had a very difficult decision to make. At least it was when I first decided to make it. Ultimately, it wasn't. I was also in the Air Force for 11 years. I took an oath to the Constitution, and like a lot of my peers, particularly who were officers, even though that we're not tied to that oath once we resign our commission, we still honor it. And I honored it. And I did what I thought was right. And I said, you know what? I'm going to try to get the word out. If I save one person, it will have been worth it. I mean, maybe I'll get the word out, and more people will be. Maybe I can educate a few more people, but that was my goal: was to go and research what was happening and clarify the science, clarify what was going on, and figure out why we were where we were.
So, in your book, this is something that's a very controversial topic, something that people might not be comfortable with. Can you share your experience in writing this, and have you faced any kind of backlash from it, from friends or family or anyone?
It's, it's funny. I've got British relatives. My mom was British, and when January 6th happened, my cousin sent me an email, and he said, "Gosh, Rich, are you okay? Where are you? You wrote this book, and you're critical of these people who kind of are, doing some scary things." And I said, "Jonathan, honestly, I appreciate it, but nowhere near the number of people who even, would believe me are reading my book, let alone people who don't believe me." Now, that's not entirely. I actually did throw my book out to a number of people who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum, because I wanted to take a balanced view of things. I wanted to get as objective a view as possible. I think that any serious examination deserves that, and that's what I did. And people who I know people who are very much on the other side of the political spectrum who really appreciated my book, appreciated what I had to say. They didn't agree with everything in it, although they did say that I changed their mind on something. So, as far as anxiety and fear over what others are going to do, it's a dangerous world out there. I come from the airline industry where I was actually I was one of the guys who could have been assigned to one of those airplanes on 9/11, one of 40. So I kind of dodged a bullet by odds a lot more dramatically than that. When it comes to terrorism, though, a lot of people were scared after 9/11. And I was like, look, it was awful. We lost a lot of people, but, the nature of terrorism is that it's only a very small number of people. It just has, effective terrorism has a broad reach, but it doesn't affect a lot of people. There are so many critics out there. I suppose I could be the one that gets inappropriate attention, but again, if you take that oath, you got to do what you believe is right, and I was doing what I believe is right, so I'm fine with it.
So Richard, one of the things I want to touch on is you talk about doing what you believe in right and the courage to do that, and you really had to face a lot of self-reflection to get to that point, to say, you know what, this is my belief. I truly believe that this is what's right for America. I truly believe that I might be saving lives. What is your advice to people who are out there right now who are going to listen, now or later on to the broadcast, on trying to come to terms with doing things that they truly believe are right, but maybe could be controversial and maybe they are fearful?
I don't think there's an easy answer for that in terms of an answer that's really going to smack anybody upside the head and change their mind. But I'm a parent of 3, and I've spoken to my kids about what's right and wrong on many occasions, as I'm sure just about every parent does. And what I've told my kids is, you know what, you're going to have lots of opportunities to do what's right and what's wrong. And I don't expect you're going to do what's right every single time. I certainly haven't in my life. But I will tell you, when it's all said and done, after a little bit of wisdom, given the choice to do what you know is right versus what you know is wrong, do what's right. I've never regretted that. And it's ultimately that is, you can't make it, you can make it more complicated than that, but you don't need to.
Well, you bring up so many good points in that. And one of the things is, especially, when you've seen great tragedies in the past, historically, when people are afraid to speak up, when people are afraid to have free speech and that's stifled, then that's when atrocities end up happening. We had some speakers on earlier, Sarah M. and Leah Tran from Cambodia and Vietnam, and both shared their stories of just complete oppression and having to escape their countries. And I think it's an important concept of people have to be willing to speak up. And even though this might be an uncomfortable conversation, as long as it's done respectfully, it's a conversation that people should be willing to have.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. You said my book is controversial, and there are some controversial elements in it, although a large portion of it is science and economics, and really none of that should be controversial. And I lost my train of thought now. I'm sorry, what was the question, Amy?
So I was saying about controversial topics, and I think you were going down a path that some of this stuff shouldn't be controversial, but I think that we're in a society now where even things that shouldn't be controversial, people suddenly, like, it's either you're you're black or you're white. It's one side or the other, and people have stopped having civil discourse.
Yeah, well, and now I know what I was going to say, um, which is this: that there are things that you talk about, and there's things that you don't. And you're in the intro to your segment, you said, I don't talk politics, religion, or sex. When I fly with guys, and they're new, and I don't know them, uh, and gals, although it's pretty much guys in my career. Uh, Occasionally, somebody wants to talk politics, and my general response to that is, let's start talking about religion and sex first, and if that goes well, then I'll talk politics with you. And genuinely, politics is the worst of the three. Um, and so, we live in this world where we have Facebook and other social media that has provided this forum to have these political discussions. And um, scientists or people who deal with ethical approaches to science and technology are always struggling to see how is the best way to use technology. I think most people would agree we're not using technology in the best way. I would argue that Facebook should really, and all these social media should really split paths where you should be able, and the AI is there, where you can just say, you know what, I want to hear about Joe's daughter, and I want to get the updates on what his wife is doing for Christmas, but I don't really care, who he supports for congressman or dog catcher or any of that. And and we should be able to have that option because yes, in a free society, you should be able to have the option to communicate about politics. But on the other hand, um, the polite thing to do was never to just talk about all these things. When I grew up, my childhood friends, until Facebook came around, I couldn't tell you who they voted for, who their family voted for. And now all this stuff is in your face. And the problem, Amy, if you just to just go on a moment longer, is you have a religion. It's probably not the same as mine. You have things that you like to do in your personal time that may not be the same as me. All those things that are kind of personal that really don't belong in this forum, they don't need to be shared. I don't, you don't want to know what I'm doing. I don't need to know what kind of, tattoos that Joe is having a sacred ceremony on to do. And it's similar with politics. We don't need to be sharing so much in the political arena, except for those people who really want to go at it, and they can have at it.
Well, I think the thing is too is it so often people look at it as a right and wrong instead of it being that I have a different value system than you. I have a different experience than you. You bring up some great points about things that you've been through, your education, your background. And of course, my background, my education, my perspective is going to be different. And it doesn't make either wrong, it makes it different. And when we live in a society that says that they value uniqueness, we should appreciate the different values as part of that uniqueness.
Yeah, absolutely. And the fact is, um, people still really aren't learning the lessons of conflict, and and so there are people who think that everything uh, that President Trump did, bar none, was just wonderful. They loved the way he presented himself. They loved the way, all his policies, everything. They wouldn't change a thing. And of course, there are people who think the same thing about Biden and disagree entirely. And those people are, that's not a conversation that should be had, because you're never, when one of those people goes and talks to the other about who should be president or certain elements, then nothing's to be gained. Now there are conversations you can have. You can talk about how much you love your country. what you want for your country, what you want for your kids. There are things that we can um, communicate that where we can produce productive solutions and have conversations that are actually useful. But we're having so many conversations that are not useful. Everybody's in their own echo chambers. And at the end of the day, we are in a society where people are really concerned and feel like we're going, at least in some ways, in the wrong direction.
Yeah, so we're about midway through. One of the things for the audience out there, if you're listening today or to the recorded session, is my two books, The Consummate Communicator, Character Traits of True Professionals, and the Project Manager, Life is a Project, are both available today free for Kindle download. And thank you, Richard, because I will tell you, I mean, this is an author event, and books, whether you agree with them or not, all knowledge is worth having. If we were in a society where people were afraid to write, where people were burning books, what a tragedy. And you hear about in other places where books that have been censored, books have been banned, books have been burned, and we've done that in history. And I think that people's voices need to be heard. Take the time to read it, and then you can decide, do you agree with it or not? And then, if you like Richard's ideas, that's great. You can reach out to him on his website that he's going to send me later. Or if you don't agree with him, that's fine. Just be respectful that he's allowed to have his own thoughts, his own views.
Yeah,
and the ethos are.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't get the opportunity to say it earlier, but thank you for doing this. I know it must be a whole lot of work to organize, and I appreciate it. And you're offering books for free, so people should show you some love, and then they should tell their friends about your books so that they can buy them. I'm not having a. You asked me if I'm doing a discount. I'm not, because I'm donating all my proceeds, but so.
I just put my Facebook page in here. I'm sorry about that. I meant it to be your link, so I'm going to send the link to your Amazon right now. But if you're not on my Facebook page, there's my Facebook page. Please like it. So you're saying that you're donating your proceeds. Could you continue? Because it's a good cause.
Yeah, well, I was initially going to donate the proceeds to the campaign, and I got the book out a little bit late. The campaign was almost over, so I donated the remaining proceeds right before a few days ago, actually, to the inauguration. I thought it was appropriate, considering they got to do extra security and all kinds of extra work after January 6th, and whatever other proceed, I'm my day job pays a lot. The writing job does not. So it's easy to kind of donate whatever proceeds that may come in the future. If COVID ever ends and I can do a book tour and maybe do a few readings and sell a few books, so I'll figure out an appropriate repository for donations.
So, Richard, if you're looking for a charity, I would strongly encourage you to look at one of our earlier authors, Maya McNulty. She did her first book was on fundraising, and she is actually one of the first young women COVID survivors. And she is starting a foundation now for people who had COVID, I'm sorry, I'm emotional about her. She's so fantastic, and she's went through so much, and she is one of those people that you read about, and to actually interact with this young woman who lost all of her hair, who couldn't walk, who was on a ventilator for 6 weeks. And
well, I got her name. Yeah, I got her name down. I'll definitely show her some love.
So definitely take a look at that interview. She is just this tremendous woman, and she had written her book before, amazing, able to address fundraising issues, and now she's going to apply that and start her own organization to help people who are suffering from long-term impacts and effects of COVID.
Super. That sounds like a very worthwhile charity indeed.
Yeah, and so since you mentioned that a lot of the impetus for this book was your observations on COVID, I just really see so much synergy there. And, who knows if things had been handled differently, maybe people like Maya and Maya herself wouldn't be suffering right now.
Yeah, uh, the you know I begin my book with a story of of my father's death. It didn't start out that way. I didn't say I'm going to write a book and write about my father dying, but even at the time, the level of carnage is unfathomable. I mean, right now we have gotten close to two two Pearl Harbor level death events in a single day, and we've exceeded Pearl Harbor and 9/11 on dozens of days. Um, it's just an amazing amount of death, and there are still people who don't appreciate that. And it's not like we drop everything. It's not like, well, okay, everybody's dying, let's go put our head in the oven or something. Life goes on. We all have to go on. But when I when I see people being interviewed on TV saying they're taking my freedom away because they want me to wear a mask when I go to the store, it aches my heart. It really does.
I try to be fair and balanced on that, Richard. And I'm just going to say I try to respect both sides. I do respect that some people feel that, this country was founded on a phrase of "give me liberty and or give me death," and some people, I don't want to judge them for their beliefs. I do believe that we each have the individual right to do what is best for us while trying to minimize that impact on others. And this is difficult times, and I think that there's two sides to it, and the more that we can have a dialogue about it and a healthy dialogue, the better, so that we can come to common ground and terms and norms and people being able to communicate. So I appreciate the sentiment. On the other hand, I think that we have to be willing to understand that some people do feel differently. And
Yeah, I mean, and let's face it, we're not going to settle anything in whatever remains of this interview. And there, of course, there's always two sides. Um, One thing I will say is, I fly the 737. Uh, when that second 737 Max went down, and I've flown those as well. We had a lot of people, including people on TV, going on and saying how safe it is, how unsafe it was. We and I'm kind of uniquely qualified to judge that because number one, I pilot the airplane. Number two, I am an engineer that understands the engineering involved, uh, and it kind of would get under my skin when I'd see people talk about uh, um, areas that really require or necessitate expertise to um, to speak intelligently upon. So you absolutely make a great point that when it comes to freedom, people should have the ability to determine what is right for them and what's wrong for them. But when you have these conversations, when you start debating about what's appropriate science and what's not, that's when it goes off the rail. And so,
agree.
yeah, so it's a great conversation about what people, whether or not people should be limited. But let's, one of these days we're going to have to figure out what's a fact and what's not and agree on that, because that makes it a very difficult conversation when you can't do that.
Well, Richard, it is actually time for us to wind up this segment. I knew this was going to be uncomfortable topics, and what I did want the audience to see is that people can have different spectrums across, different views across the spectrums, and it's okay. Civil discourse is what matters, And take a look at Richard's book. You may not like it, you may not agree, but what I would encourage you to do is read it, to digest it, and to get informed decisions. Richard, is there anything you'd like to add?
Um, just this, if you love your country, uh, now is the time to not really look to the other side and see what they're doing wrong. I grew up in New York, where it seemed like when I was growing up, the culture was based upon, uh, never miss an opportunity to put somebody down. Um, Probably the best advice I heard in the last 10 years is never miss an opportunity to lift somebody up. And we need to do that now as much as any time, to people who don't see things the way that we do. And so, yeah, sure, if you want to take a look at my book, that's great. But really, just be kind to your neighbors and people that love you, that don't see things the way that you do.
Such a good point, and so many of the amazing authors that we've had today, people like Kay Will, people like Ingrid Preika, all talking about the importance of understanding self-awareness and then loving yourself, loving others. You don't have to necessarily agree with people, but just love them. Richard, thank you so much for your time and being on the show today.
Thank you, Amy.
Have a great day.
You too.